You're listening to the Breakaway Wealth Podcast, the show that helps you build wealth faster, think outside the box, and break out of the herd. Here's your host, Jim Oliver. Welcome back, Breakaway Wealth. I'm your host, Jim Oliver, and with me today, my special guest, Sharon Spano. Welcome, Sharon.
Welcome to you, Jim. It's great to see you today, and thanks so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. You know, Sharon, before we get started, because I really love the subject that you're an expert in, and I think that it's going to really resonate with our audience. Before we dive in and we get to know a little bit about you and how you serve others and help people, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, my main focus right now, and it's evolved through the years, as you might imagine, as I have evolved, is to really work with high impact leaders and help them discover really what is holding them back, so that they could really be more effective leaders for themselves, for their businesses, and more importantly, for their families. I'm very committed to that because I'm seeing more and more families really implode as a result of the pressures in today's workplace, the market, global economy, all of those things. So it's all about self-leadership.
You know, I love that. Sharon, you don't know this, but I'm writing a book called Owner Shift. And it's the 5 shifts that you need to, like, not be a consumer, but a owner of your life, an owner of your future. And it's really all around money and everything, but it's running your life like an owner of a business, like taking ownership, not, well, you know, look, if I would just get a raise at work, then this would just, you know, like, it's like take ownership. And so I love that concept of what you teach people and leaders. And, you know, it's funny because if we think about like when somebody says leaders, what do we think of? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting thing because I did leadership development and strategy work with, companies all across North America for most of my career. And I always taught that leadership is a place to come from, not a place to get to, meaning it's not about the title. We all know there are people in very high places with very fancy titles who are not effective leaders. And so to me, it's a mindset. It's a way of being in the world. And I think any one of us can exhibit the qualities of solid leadership in whatever role we're playing in our lives. So that's why I like the concept of self-leadership, because I'm always looking at not only what is happening within your business or the corporate environment that you're in, but what does your life look like? Because if you're making tons of money and you're a CEO of, a Fortune 500 company or whatever, but your kids hate you and, your dog runs the other way when you come home and you've had 7 wives. I mean, there's other things we should be thinking about. Because we all know, and I talk a lot about the emptiness of success, because many of the people that come to me, they've achieved and acquired all the toys, the cars, the houses, all the good things that we all in our earlier years certainly aspire to having, but their lives are not, they're just not fulfilled. It's not that they're necessarily unhappy, but something is missing and they're trying to figure that out.
Yeah. So I love that point, because then what they do is they go out and they work towards some other goal, or they buy some other toy, or they buy another house, and they think this will make me happy.
Right.
And then when it doesn't, then they just keep repeating that pattern for the rest of their lives, and they die miserably.
Exactly.
Or not miserably, but they die miserable. And so, like, it's funny because this isn't about money, right? And I'll tell a quick story. When my 27-year-old almost was in grade school, she said, the teacher asked her, "What's the golden rule?" Well, I always taught my kids, he with the gold makes the rule, right? Meaning me. Mm-hmm. And so she raised her hand and said that. And she was so mad when she got home. And she said, "You told me that was the golden rule. And that's not the golden rule." And I said, "Well, it is the golden rule, but not the one the teacher wanted to hear." Yeah. And so, like, you realize, I always say poor people are in love with money and wealthy people don't really care about money, because you realize it's just an exchange, it's a commodity. But you've worked with a lot of high achieving leaders, have built wealth, but still feel, like you said, unfulfilled. What are the biggest time and money traps that keep them in that cycle, and how do you break that?
Well, that's a huge question. What I my work is grounded in human development, and it's all trauma informed. So I have a PhD in human and organizational systems, and what see and I wrote a book called The Pursuit of Time and Money. We did some research looking at how people experience time and money through a developmental lens, and that's a mouthful because there are 12 stages of human development that we know of. Just to give your listeners a sense of that, I'm often heard to say that based on the research, roughly 58 to 62% are only at stage 4 or 5.
Mm.
That's where we land. We land at the expert or achiever stage, and we typically don't move beyond that. The point being that whatever stage we're at, we experience time and money differently. And so I did that work because I was curious in we don't talk a lot about that correlation between time and money. I mean, we do it casually, but we don't really think about them. And yet, in reality, we are making literally dozens and dozens of decisions every day based on how much money and how much time we have. And I got curious about it because what I was seeing with my clients is they either had a lot of time and no money, meaning they weren't doing what they needed to do to generate it, or they had a lot of money and no time because they were working so much to reel it in. And I was curious as to the what behind that. So when you say the barriers, they vary. So for instance, at an expert stage of development, that person, and again, I'm being a little stereotypical, they may focus more on the details, the efficiency, rather than being effective. And they can get caught up in perfectionism around time and maybe not do the billings as often as they should. For instance, I've worked with a lot of engineers and they'll get caught in the weeds. We know doctors, for instance, don't manage their own practices because they are good at being doctors, but they're not good at bringing in the money, right? So people in those levels will focus more on the work itself than the actual acquisition of money. They've got other people that kind of do that detail work for them. But then when you get in the achiever stage, and it's not all necessarily correlated with industries or expertise as I'm outlining it, but we do see some relationships there. Achievers are often where those of us are entrepreneurs land, and we're out there and we're chasing that money and we're chasing that time always. But when you move up into the later stages, and I'll give an example, like construct aware is what we call one of the laters. Now money becomes more about um, serving humanity. I'm over the car, I'm over the house, I'm over the jewelry. I want to do good. I want to be a philanthropic individual, and I want to solve, whatever problems out there I have an interest in. And my time is almost now, it's valued in a much deeper way. It's more about the people in my life and, recreation and maybe things that are not so much about me, but about, again, being with others and community, things of that nature. So again, it varies depending on what stage you are at, what we call center of gravity, where you land. I said a
Yeah.
mouthful. So what are your thoughts around all of that?
No, I mean, you just gave me a lot of that's a lot right there. So like what I think about is, okay, what's the goal? What's the vision? Like, and I think that, with your education, your background, I want to hear your perspective on vision, because I find that people struggle with vision.
Right.
I have a vision board. It's like a wall that's this paint that you can, write on, and then you can wipe it off, and it's just the
Hmm.
whole wall. And I write this thing all the time, and it changes. Like I have travel up there, and there's like one place I'm not going. I haven't erased it, but I decided I wasn't going there.
Hmm.
And so like this vision to me is kind of this evolving and moving thing. And as you go through those stages in your life, the vision changes. But there's so many people, whether they're 20 years old or 80 years old, they don't have a vision of really what they want.
Yeah, that's. I would be the devil's advocate here for a minute because
Okay.
I think what I have found in my career, going way back, and even with my clients, is we focus more on mission. Like, what is your
Okay.
mission in life? So the mission to me doesn't change. Like when I developed my mission statement, years ago, and it was back in the old Cubby days, which when I thought it was just like a ridiculous thing. But then I kept meeting all these people who, when I would say, how are you doing all of this? How are you managing this company and your kids and your travel and you have this whole life? And they'd say, well, I have a personal mission statement. So finally, after 10 people said that to me, I thought I better consider this. So I went through that process, developed it, and that has never changed. Now, what has changed is how I implement it, how I execute it. So in my earlier careers, it was, early part of my career, it was, traveling all around North America in and out of these companies and doing all of that. But then again, as I continued to grow and evolve and learn new things, it changed. And then I was speaking all over and writing books and whatever. And now it's more one-on-one, because I want more free time. I've taken up golf. I'm traveling more. There's a lot of things. My life changed, and usually people's lives will change and they'll shift to a later stage of development, going back to that based on a life circumstance. And in my case, our son Michael passed away in 2008. He was our only child. And that changed the game for me. My perspectives on time and money shifted dramatically. And I went from an achiever stage to construct aware, which is why I mentioned that one, because I know that one very well because I'm in it. And it's a very different place to be. But the mission has never changed. I've always, always been about helping people realize their human potential, their highest potential.
Well, I love that. I mean, that's a great mission. It's funny because when you said mission, I thought to myself, okay, well, what? Because again, for the company, we have mission statements, with
Right.
like all this stuff, and I own a few different companies, so it's like we always get to that. But
Mhm.
personally, like if somebody said, "What's your mission?" I would say it's help people understand the it's understand money, how money
Mhm.
really works,
Mhm.
and I think that's the goal of the podcast. That's the goal of our company. That's the goal of all of these things is what because what people have been told about money is a lie.
Right. Yeah.
And you talk about time and money, and I love that. And because I tell people, everybody just assumes you have to exchange time for money.
Right. Right.
And so they live their 80, 100, whatever years they get on this earth before they graduate. They live their whole time thinking, I got to go to work. I got to work harder. And one of the things that even leaders believe is that working harder equals more success, but then they feel burned out, right?
Right. Right.
And so what's the flaw of that thinking, and how can they there's Sharon, there's like, I'm not articulating it very well, but it's like, like Dan Sullivan has a book called 2x or 10x is easier than 2x, right? Like
Mhm.
like 2x is linear, like I just got to work harder. I just got to get a couple more clients, but like 10x, you actually have to create something. You have to
Right.
create value, and kind of what you're talking about. You're going all over the country doing all of this, and then you're just like, now you're like, I'm doing this one-on-one stuff because I want to protect my time. I only get so much time on this earth, right? And I want to play golf, which I love that you want to play golf because I'm a golfer. My ex-wife would say, you can play golf 4 days a week and spend all these hours. Can't we just have a conversation like for 8 hours? And I'm like, no, that's
No.
just not my personality. Like 30 minutes,
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, here's what
maybe
here.
talk about, um, maybe talk about not hustling to create for wealth creation, but like, what's the alternative?
Well, let me first say, as you were talking, what came to my mind is I firmly believe that the whole idea of work life balance is a myth. It's a lie. I don't think in this day and age we can ever totally achieve work life balance because life is too fast and too much is coming at us. I prefer the word integration, work life integration, so that you're looking at your whole life all of the time. You're not we're not compartmentalized, we're living it all the time. And so sometimes you have to make different choices depending on what's happening to you. When my son was critically ill, I had to choose. I couldn't go to the gym every day. There just wasn't time for that, and running my business. you know. So you're making choices literally day to day, minute to minute, sometimes based on what life is about in that time frame. And to me, that is true integration. And that means you make choices about, if today, I know you're big on working out, and I am too, and I get up every morning and I go work out. But I just did, for instance, a charity golf tournament in my son's name 2 weeks ago, and I had people in from all over the country for 4 days. Tuesday morning was not a workout day. I
Yeah.
was wiped out. I had 40 people for dinner one night, 92 golfers. I mean, we were, done. Tuesday was just a chill day. I still worked, I did things, but I didn't make it to the gym. And I
Yep.
give myself permission to listen to my body, my spirit, my soul, to make those kinds of choices. Then to your question, I think it's a state of mind. So we can be in that achiever state of mind where we're chasing it all, and it's a lot of work, and it can often be very disappointing, and not even produce the results we want. But to your point earlier, if we have a clear vision, mission, whatever we want to call it, and we're doing the work to develop ourselves, that's what I love about the work I do, is that it's a developmental process. We're not just working toward goals. We're actually shifting our consciousness. Then we're able to manifest the clients we want, the work we want, the wealth we want.
Okay, so I love what you just said there at the end, because um I think people use that word because I've read and I went to your site and I know how you think of this word, but sometimes people, when you hear the word manifest, right?
Yeah, sounds woo-wooey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's a guy, Dr. James Doty, I think is the way you say his last name. He's from Stanford. He says it in a really cool way. And I've done heart math. I mean, I have my heart math thing. I believe in heart coherence, and I and all of that stuff. So for people that, when you say manifest, that confuses them, talk to me just, and let's talk about how people can manifest wealth and time freedom and happiness.
I think it's, maybe a better word than manifestation, because I know what you're saying. It can sound very, esoteric or woo-wooey, new agey. It's really the ability to attract that which we desire. So in my book, I talk about radical abundance. And to me, radical abundance, we did the work looking at scarcity to abundance. Radical abundance is about having a sense of fulfillment no matter what is happening in your life, because that's a
Yeah.
state of mind. And so if I have that state of mind, I'm going to attract the right people in my life. I'm not going to attract toxic people in my life. If I do attract them, they're probably going to shift away from me very quickly because I'm not a fit for them. My work is in human systems, human and organizational systems. So we do a lot of work around the energy in those systems. Energy is a real thing. It's not, some woo woo thing. Everything is energy. And so I'm going to attract the energy of money. I'm going to attract the energy of people that are in alignment with the depth of work that I'm about, better clients. It just starts to all level out. And it doesn't mean that it's that way all the time. But I believe very firmly, based on my experience with clients and even in my own life, when we do attract those other elements in our lives, whether it's people or maybe a contract falls through or whatever, there's always something to learn from that makes me even better. And that is what we call in my field a developmental shift. I like to say to my clients that we because I'm not a therapist, never wanted to be a therapist, but we look backwards to see what we can learn from perhaps trauma in the past, because I find most all of us have some level of trauma, and high achievers particularly so, because that's what catapulted them to be achievers, as something happened in their life, usually at a very early age. And so we can look back to learn from that, but we just don't stare at the page in the way that we do in therapy, where we just keep revisiting that trauma. It's about, okay, what can we learn in order to grow from it? And that's where the power lies, in our ability to reach a place where we're attracting that which we seek and desire and actually deserve.
Is that so? That's in your book, The Pursuit of Time and Money?
Yeah, the book is about how we experience time and money through the various stages,
Yeah.
and what I've done of late, because to figure, people always want to know what stage I'm at, particularly achievers, and the assessment is complicated and expensive. So we've created a shorter version, a quiz, if you will, on my website that looks at just the six main ones that we see in the in the workplace. So we have a special page for that based on your podcast. And it's just, people can find it at sharonspano.com/breakaway wealth, no spaces, all lowercase. And it just
Perfect.
takes a few minutes, and you'll get to see where you are. And then the report that comes out shows you all of those six stages, but also gives you some information on time and money, how you may be thinking about it, and what you can do in a concrete way to move to another level of awareness about your experience of time and money.
I wish I would have come up with radical abundance. I like that a lot. So I'm always talking to people. It's funny what you just said too, is, I grew up in foster care. Then I was adopted into a very abusive family that was poor. We were homeless at one point in time, evicted
Hmm.
a lot of times. And I like loved money. Like I wanted to know what the hell people that were living in nice houses
Yeah.
knew about money that I didn't. And it sent me down the wrong path, because I got like involved with like Wall Street, being a financial planner. And hey, it was great for me because I was controlling their money and I was making the money, right?
Hmm.
But my clients, what they really thought that what their accounts were growing at really wasn't happening. And because of fees and inflation and
Hmm.
taxes and everything else, there was very little growth. But when they get a report from Wall Street, it says, hey, you're getting 9.38%, blah 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 blah, and you think, I'm doing pretty good, but I
Yeah.
don't know why my money's not growing. And so many people feel like that. And then I realized that the really wealthy people that I knew, they had their own businesses and they bought real estate, and that's where wealth was created, not in this mainstream thing of save money, wait
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 years for it to
Yeah.
accumulate, and then start taking money out of that account and hope that you don't live too long and run out of money.
Right. Right.
It, that's scarcity. That's a
Yeah.
scarcity plan. I've had clients in 3 years. This is one client replaced $1 million a year income between him and his wife in 3 years.
Hmm.
So now they have that coming in, not from their time, but from their assets. That's abundance,
Right.
because now I just build from that. Hey, a
Yeah.
million bucks isn't enough. I've fallen into Parkinson's law. My lifestyle increased to my income level. Okay, well, let's go increase that.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, because one of the things that I talk about in the book is scarcity was obvious. One of the questions is, what did you learn about money from your parents? What's the
Yeah,
first thing you remember learning? And that's the trajectory right there. They're still living that, but it's at a subconscious level. And then, what do you believe about time? So what do you believe about time? What do you believe about money? Well, what we saw, scarcity was pretty obvious. Abundance was pretty obvious. What was fascinating was the moderate scarcity, moderate abundance, because they were essentially doing the same things, saving for retirement as an example. But
yeah,
the moderate scarcity perspective was coming more from fear, where the other was coming more from just reasonable responsibility. So the example I like to use is a guy that I interviewed who he was saving for retirement. Okay, that's a good thing. You've got your 401k or whatever, and he's 30 something, but would not take his kids and family on vacation or even to Disney. And he actually absolutely lived here in the Orlando area because he's saving for way out there. So now you're not living your life, you're doing the right thing, but it's based on a fear, which in my mind, a fear based decision is not a decision at all. And so those were some of the things that we saw. The big difference is they were doing the same things, but based on fear versus, I'm going to responsibly do what I need to do to plan for the later years of my life, but I'm going to live my life along the way.
yeah. Well, what you just described is, not to pick on him, but Dave Ramsey teaches, like, no, if you can't, don't take your spouse out to dinner.
Hmm.
Don't do, like, live this scarcity thing, and 20, 30, 40 years from now, you'll be better off for that. And if you're alive in 40 years or
Yeah.
if you're alive tomorrow. But Robert Kiyosaki says savers are losers
Hmm.
um because it's not about saving money, and you're going to make somebody really happy because somebody in Wall Street is going to get to manage that, or your bank is going to get to use that to go make a lot more money, or the government is going to waste it, whatever it is, right? And so taking control of that is
Hmm.
really so much. Like, to me, abundance is not just what the bank account says, but it's what I feel inside. Like waking up, sleeping good,
Yeah.
being able to wake up at 4:30 and go to the
Yeah.
gym and focus on the gym, right? Like, is that's abundance to me, because I look at every day and say, how can I serve other people today? And how
Yeah.
can I like make a difference in somebody's life? Because if I could just free one person today from just one scarcity thought to one abundant thought, then it's their hero's journey, not, hey, here's why you want to listen to me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I love, by the way, I just bought your book. So if you see me like typing
Oh,
and
you're
looking
so
down, it's
kind.
because
Yeah.
and it was and I bought the Kindle version because it said it was going to take 2 weeks to get
Yeah.
this other version. So I'm like, well, I want it today.
Well,
So
thank you for that. Yeah, I buy everything Kindle because I can't carry around 30 books. I read a lot of books at the same time. But I think when you're speaking of scarcity and abundance, um, the scarcity component is hard for people to get past. So we do the work around look. I do genograms. We're looking at the family history. Where did that come from? Like in my family, I come from a very poor family too, but we never knew we were poor. We just lived our lives. Now, I lived with my paternal grandmother, but on my mother's side, my mother, total scarcity. Every
mm,
other word was cheap and those rich people. And so I carry a lot of her language in my brain and my body that I have to fight against. Luckily, I'm married to a man who lives in abundance. But I can go into fear based conversations about the economy and what's happening very quickly if I'm not careful. So I think knowing that history and knowing that it's alive in you helps. Just in the systems world we talk about, once you can acknowledge what is in that system as information rather than emotionally, you can put that to rest so that something new can emerge. And I do something called constellation work, and often we'll do constellation work around money and time. And it's just fascinating to see what shows up in the system and how accurate it is, because people will know immediately, oh my gosh, like that is exactly what I do. This is exactly what happens. And to give you an example, when I was in training for Constellation years ago, it was right when I was working on the book. And we were, practicing on each other. And I won't get into the details of the process because it's too lengthy. But there was a moment where I had a thing on the floor that said money on it with an arrow, and I just placed it where I thought it should be, and the arrow was pointing towards the door. And my facilitator, my trainer, came up to me and said, "Sharon, I just have one question. Why is money facing the door?" And I went, "Because I did it at a subconscious level. I didn't do it intentionally." But when she said that, I realized that because that's accurate. Because I'm publishing a book right now, and every time I turn around, it's money for this editor, money for that, money for the cover, money for the audio, money for the, and it was that's how it was feeling in that moment. It was like I couldn't keep up with the whole process of publishing. It was just so expensive, and then you're doing the podcast interviews, and that's money and all that. So um, it was just a moment of ha and laughter and enlightenment for me, because I was feeling that sensation and feeling the need to chase money, but didn't really understand why. And of course, that was just a short period of time, and then I was able to redirect and do what I needed to do to get past that scarcity moment. But I think we weave in and out of them, those moments of scarcity, if we have a background such as you've described, such as I've experienced. And I believe many high impact leaders and achievers have some of that in them based on what
yeah.
I've seen.
You
Even
know,
if they come from wealthy families, often if they come from wealthy families, their parents were absent. And that's a trauma right there.
You know what's funny is I just interviewed a guy who's like an Enneagram kind of specialist, and and all of that. And like he has a book called like Money Monsters or something.
Hmm.
And like but that's like his term he talks about. And I always think people that grew up in an affluent family, and I'm actually dating a woman who grew up in an affluent family, and I think, well, you have like you don't have the same money monsters, so to speak,
Yeah.
but you do have some. And like I'll use his as an example that he shared is money was weaponized as a child for him, right? Which formed his beliefs about money.
Hmm.
Mine were totally different, but we have these negative
Hmm.
scarcity mindsets about money, right? We've all heard money is the root of all evil. That's not actually what the Bible says.
No,
It says the love of
the
money
love
is the
of
root of
money.
all evil, right?
Yeah.
And I always think poor people love money a lot more than wealthy people, and that's my experience, because it's at some point you just don't care. Like, you know
I
what I
think it
mean?
runs their lives more than they would recognize. So, like when you ask the question, what do you believe about money, for instance, people in the scarcity category, as I outlined in the book, that for them, there's never enough. Doesn't matter how much they make, there's never enough because they're always scared that they're going
Yeah,
to lose it, or you know but then when you get into the abundant, they understand that it's a tool, it's a resource. And when you get into the farther side, more of radical abundance, they understand they can create it. Like my husband
yeah.
was like that. He just, well, we're going to Europe, and I go, but really, he go, yeah, no, we have it. I'll create it. He just creates what he needs in his mind. It, it's interesting.
That's, sometimes it's probably the most disappointing thing that I find. Like when you think that you've helped somebody realize that, and then they come back to you and say something about money that's so like scarcity thinking that you're like, oh my gosh, you don't get it.
Yeah.
And maybe just at that moment, they may not get it, or they've slipped back into that scarcity mindset. But it's like, no, 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 you just need to attract more money. You need to, in my mind, like the way that I attract more money is I'm going to create something, right? I'm going to create a new course. I'm going to create a new opportunity. I'm going to create, a new home by buying some real estate. I'm going to create, like, I'm going to, like, so that, and create value, right?
Right.
Like, if I can create value, then the more value I can create, the more money I'm going to have flow to me, right?
Right.
And so like when somebody says, "Hey, but I think about downsizing because of this," I go, "Oh, wow, okay, let's start over."
Yeah, if you've
you
ever
know,
been on a committee or a board where there's one person that thinks, oh, the budget's not happening, we got to start cutting quality of life, and we're going through this now. I live up in the mountains 6 months out of the year, and you've got one person that wants to start, instead of a pound cheeseburger, we're going to give them a quarter pound. No, just raise the dues $50 a month for everybody. Nobody's going to care. They're going to notice and care more if you start cutting their quality of food at the clubhouse, kind of thing. you know
yeah,
let's create more value rather than take something away. And if we have to charge a little more in fees, we can do that. So that's the difference. I want to say one thing that I think is
yeah,
very important, and I'd love to hear your thought on this, if you're okay with my offering this to you.
yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed in this work is that how we spend our time and money it sends a very important message to the people in our lives about who they are in our lives, how we value them. And I wonder how you would respond to that, because this is kind of a theory that I have based on my experience with working with so many different people.
So like, yeah, no, I think I was in my 20s and somebody said, "Let me see your check register." This shows you how old I am. What- and I'll tell you what's important to you, right? So
Hmm.
that's kind of what you're saying. And
Yeah.
so it's funny because I spend most of my money. I have a 16-year-old granddaughter that lives with me
Hmm.
full time, and I spend money on her. And somebody will say, "Why is she driving around in a whatever Jeep Wrangler?" I'm like, because. because she can't, right? Because that's what I want her to be driving around
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
And so I would say like the in I spend my money on stuff like that and experiences. And when
Right.
I say experiences, if I'm going to go to Europe, I'm going to be laying down when I go, by the way,
Yeah,
and we're going to
exactly.
the best hotel
Yeah.
and we're going to have the best food and how
Yeah.
many Michelin star restaurants can we find? And so like I spend my time on the people in my life that I care about, and I spend too much money on golf because I'm sure it's got to be the equipment, not me. But I also
I
am a
agree.
realist and I spend a lot of money on golf instruction
Yeah,
because I want to be able to do it the right way,
me too.
not, don't put a band-aid on my swing and don't assume because
Yeah.
I'm 59 years old that I can't swing it like somebody in their 20s, because I can still hit the ball over 300 yards
Wow.
and my hips will still move, maybe not like some of these kids, but they'll move enough. And
Yeah.
I play with people like are younger than me. So where I spend my time and money is on her, on my dog that I love that's looking at me right here, and my experiences,
Yeah.
lifestyle, like
Yeah.
like enjoying my life.
Well, and I think I put that out there for your listeners because I run into far too many people who are working, working, working. And, I have a client right now that has $100 million portfolio and no connection with his kids at all.
Yeah,
And now we're trying to work on that, but it's almost too late. So,
yeah.
that's that integration I'm talking about. Because if you're making the money for your kids, but now you're losing your kids in the process, like what is the point? You know?
Yeah.
So it's always, and it's not easy. And I know it's not easy. You have a lot of things if you have a company that you're dealing with and you only have so much time. But what I find is, again, it's that scarcity mentality. And it often goes back to conversations around, well, only I can do this and only I can do that. You're not delegating, you're not hiring the right people, whatever it is that is keeping you from living your best life and living radical abundance in the midst of it, such that you're making the money and you're doing all the things, but you're also making time for the people that you love and care about.
So you know what I love about what you just said there is, there's a guy, Dan Sullivan, who has strategic coach, and
Hmm.
I swear for not 40 years, but 35 years, I remember when I was in my 20s and I was listening to him say what you just said.
Oh,
It's
really?
like not, it's like,
Yeah.
and I was like, no, 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 I'm the talent. Like I'm the
Yeah.
one that's got to do this.
Yeah.
Right. And thank goodness I'm not ever smart enough to get a PhD, and I wasn't a very good student. But once I learned something, Sharon, I learn it, I internalize it, and I couldn't have the companies that I have without the people that
Right.
I have running those companies. And I want them to know, in a perfect world, I would never talk to you.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, like in a perfect world, you just run the company. I don't mean like like in the beginning, they all bring me problems, right? But
Sure.
then
Sure.
as they grow in confidence and competence, then they never bring me problems. And we're only
Hmm.
talking about good things and check-ins and everything else. But people would always say, Jim, what's the formula? What's the secret with that? And I said,
Hmm.
well, I don't know if it's a secret, but I hire really good people, I
Right.
overpay them, and I give everybody opportunities for equity
Right.
because I want you to act like an owner,
Well,
right?
and to me, that is the essence of leadership. To me, if we leaders do a lot of things, but my PhD was on the intersection between adult development, leadership, and wisdom. And so I researched um, how leaders at the different stages exhibited their role as a leader in the context of wisdom. And the thing is, the simplest version is, to me, leaders develop and influence people.
Mm.
When you're at the higher levels, that's your job, is to really grow up these people to some degree. And that's just what I feel is the most effective. And if you're not giving them the opportunity to step up in the way that you've just described, then you're always going to be the one that has to do everything, and you're going to have a revolving door of people. Because why would they stay if there's no career path for them, if they're not learning and growing? What's the point? They're really just they're managers. And there's nothing wrong with being a manager. To me, the difference is, a manager is really management is designed to really create order in the system and handle the activities, but leadership is very different. And it sounds contradictory from what I said earlier, in that I do believe everybody can be a leader, even if they're a manager, because you always have the potential, even in a managerial role, to develop and influence somebody around you.
Yeah. No, I love that. And so, you mentioned Covey earlier, and again, I read these things when I kind of had I know in my mind I had a scarcity mindset in my 20s, and so when you read Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, when you have a scarcity mindset, some of it doesn't make sense to you.
Right, right.
And over the last 40 years, as it has made more sense to me, it's like you
Mm,
start to see it because when you have an
mm,
abundant mindset and you read a book like yours or Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, you use it as a tool and the information as a tool to get more and more and more abundant in your thinking. And when you have a scarcity mindset, you say, "Oh, that doesn't work because that's I'm not in that situation." Right?
yeah,
They
yeah,
don't know my situation.
right,
and
right.
and so like to me, like I love just your approach. And there's so many people out there, Sharon, that are like, okay, I'm not happier, I'm making more money, but I'm not happier. Why am I not happier? And I really encourage everybody in the audience to get Sharon's book and check that out, because I love, again, that term, radical abundance. But because I know what you mean when you say that, or I have a vision of what you mean when you say that, and the way that you describe scarcity and abundance is really cool and unique, and I love that, because I try to tell people it's like it's like abundance, like I don't know, it's like that growth mindset versus fixed mindset mentality. And abundance is, I want everybody, there's plenty of money for everybody,
Yeah,
right? and
yeah.
and and so I'm never ever in competition with somebody else. I was when I was younger, and I always felt like not happy about that.
Yeah.
I'm in collaboration with other people, because if I collaborate with you, and you and I together can be creative in a different way than either of us can be separate,
Mhm.
and then that collaboration creates abundance and value and for other people, then all of a sudden, like the flow of energy and money is more than either one of us ever thought about. And I try
Right,
to tell
right.
people that, but people don't really get it.
Yeah, it takes some time, I think, and again, that's partly why I love the work that I do, because we can again look at the past, look at the source of that scarcity, and have and I give people practices. I customize practices so that they can actually work on whatever that subconscious thought is and see themselves. The key is learning to witness yourself in the moment as you're making these choices around time and money. And even other aspects of life. And once they learn to witness that way, then they automatically start to transform and make better choices and different choices. And that's where I think the attraction can shift dramatically, because there's always a block. There's always something that keeps us from realizing whatever it is we want in our lives. And then sometimes we're just wanting things based on what everybody else says we should want. And that's where the hole is. We got to figure that out too. That's been a big surprise for me when I help people develop that mission statement. Is so many people literally do not even know what they really want.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And those, like, when you said what you just said about what other people think and stuff, I had somebody the other day say to me, like, well, your Enneagram is, like, because I said on the test, I was 99.58 and 99.53. And they said, okay, I want you to answer this question as honestly as you can. Or just like
Hmm.
immediately, right? And I said, okay. And they said, you really give a crap what other people think? And I said, no. And they said, okay,
That's an
then
eight.
you're not a three. That's a people pleaser.
Yeah, that's
You're
an
not
eight.
a people pleaser.
I'm married to an eight. I work
Are
with a
you?
lot of eights. I attract eights for some reason. I don't know
Yeah.
why. Yeah. And I love
Well,
working with them because they're powerful people. Yeah.
And I don't like in my neighborhood, again, I'm one of the only single people in this neighborhood, and I'm one of the 20% that live here full time. And my friends, I have a normal car, but then I have a jacked up Bronco that the top's off, and then I got,
Mhm.
a stereo that I probably shouldn't have in there. And they like, I know I drive through this neighborhood and they think, what the hell is wrong with him? And it's just me being me because I don't really care what they think,
Yeah, right, right.
and but I do have this strong desire to help people. I know you do, and I feel that from you and your energy, and I think it's so cool because having this desire to help people, a lot of people have that, but you have not only the education but the experience of, okay, I know where, it's like if you were a neurosurgeon, there's only so many things that go wrong with the brain, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
and so once you've seen it all X number of times and you have the knowledge to help them, you're like, okay, I just got to figure out where you're at,
Yeah,
right? I got to
yeah,
figure out which
yeah,
which one are you,
yeah.
and if
I'm
you're,
just holding up the mirror. I'm holding up the mirror. I'm the crucible for you to, figure it out, and, I have a 12-week process, called Potential Unleashed, and it's amazing. I'm amazed because it's really a hybrid of all my years of training and experience, and I'm amazed. And, some people will want another round, or sometimes even will work a year. Depends on where they are when they come in. But what we can do in 12 weeks is amazing to me because people. They come in committed. I don't want to work with somebody who's not committed to transformation in their own lives, and usually they come to me because they've been in therapy or somewhere else, and they've done that, been there, and they got what they got, but they're looking for something else. And I love that because they have a level of self-awareness already, and then we can really in 12 weeks do just a tremendous amount of work to get them clearer on where they want to go, and they literally shift their perspectives on so many things.
I
It's
love
why
that.
I'm
So
still
where
with
does somebody find that 12-week process, or how do they learn more about that, Sharon?
my website, SharonSpano.com. And then the one sheet that we've done for you, specifically, there's opportunities at the bottom of that. They can take the quiz. The book is there. They can book a discovery call with me. And again, that's SharonSpano.com/breakaway wealth. But, it's not for everybody. And you can always do a call with me, and then we figure out if I'm a fit for you and you're a fit for me, because it's deep work, and we've got to make sure that we are connected in a way that matters.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that at the end too, because if you don't have that right, like you said, that right connection, and whether you're right for them and they're right for you, then you're fighting an uphill battle. And if they're not ready,
Right.
there's a great book called The Magic of Thinking Big, and he says action cures fear. And then what I kind of realized over my years is action cures everything. But if you're
Hmm.
not ready to take action,
Yeah.
then it doesn't really matter whether you're a trainer, a
Yeah.
nutritionist. I mean, you're just
Yeah.
wasting your time,
Yeah. I used to say years ago, it's always about results. Everything else is conversation.
Yeah,
So,
I love
in
it.
my younger years, I wanted to work with anyone who needed help and support. But what I've learned is, as the work has evolved, to your point, not everybody's ready, and that's okay. Uh, you have to really be in a space where you're willing to do the work uh, to allow the change to occur.
Yeah, no, I love that. All right, Sharon. I said, this happens to me a lot. I said we're going to go 30 minutes, and I know we're way over that. But so let me
No
get down
worries.
to my last two questions.
Okay.
And I would encourage everybody to go and take the quiz. And thank you for setting that up for just the audience here. I'm going to go do it. So I've already bought the book. Talk about action.
Yeah.
I'm great at action. I'm not great at follow up. So that's why I have other people around me to make sure that I do that
Yeah.
or they do it. But Sharon, with your education, with your experience, with all the people that you've worked with, somewhere along the line, somebody had to give you some great advice. So what's the best advice somebody's ever given you?
So many people, so much great advice. But as you asked me that, what comes to mind, the big changer for me was when I got the training in the constellation work, and you really start looking at systems in a totally different way. And Judy Wilkes Smith was my one of my many facilitators as I went through various certifications. And what I learned from that is to stay in your lane. There's very specific principles around the constellation work. It's based in like 70 years of research. And those principles have changed my life, helped me
Mm,
to know where I can be of use even to people in my own family, and when I need to just let them be because I'm not a part of that system over there, that, family system that's, maybe remote, and just stay in my lane.
stay in my lane. That's
Yeah.
great advice. And you know what's funny is when there's a book called Who Not How. So like one thing that I've learned in it's a little bit different interpretation of that advice, but I don't try to learn how to do things that I'm not good at
Mhm.
or that somebody else is way better at. I just hire that person to do
Mhm.
whatever I need that done, right?
Yes.
And you talk about like not buying back your time, but like how and I know everybody that I've ever talked to, and thank goodness I learned this in my 20s, was if somebody could mow my lawn at the time for $10 an hour,
Mhm.
then let them mow the lawn,
Right,
right?
right,
Like,
right.
and everything in my life. I mean, if I can get somebody to go to the grocery store for $20 an
Yeah,
hour,
yeah,
way better than me going to the grocery store. And
yeah.
something about being single is like I started to learn that in my 16-year-old she just started with my trainer today.
Ah,
And she goes at so she took my 5 a.m. slot because she's got to come home, take a shower, and be at school by 7. But so then I moved back my time to 6 a.m., which I like 5 a.m. better. But for those 2 days, she's doing that. But I'm so excited that she's doing it because it was her choice. She's taking action. She asked, "Hey, can I call Jen and talk to her about training?" And like, I love that growth moment because, like, you know, and there's something you said earlier that made me think about that, but it was just like creating this environment where almost like this environment where people are motivating themselves, right? Like when
yeah,
you have the freedom to pursue that abundance. I don't know what her goals are with that.
yeah,
She's a 16-year-old girl. I don't think a 59-year-old grandpa should be like telling her what her goals should be with her
yeah.
body or her fitness or whatever. Like that's between her and her trainer
Yeah,
and
they'll
her
figure it out.
herself.
Yeah, yeah, they will figure it out.
They'll figure it out, right? So, okay, last question. If God came down from heaven, Sharon, and only allowed you to retain the knowledge that you've received from one book that you've read, what
Oh, gee,
would that book be?
that's tough. Well, anything by Ken Wilber. Um, I've got so many of them, but I think the one that really shifted me was the theory of everything, or the brief theory of everything. I may be messing up the title. Anything by Ken Wilber, that was changed my life. And then the theory of you by Otto Schwarmer. I've read that many times. I
Yeah,
read some pretty heavy stuff, but I read, a lot of self-help, and I read a lot of spiritual work. The Bible certainly changed my life.
yeah.
I mean, I've got probably hundreds of books around me here in my office, so I'm not really good at remembering titles anymore, but certainly Ken Wilber was huge for me.
I love that. And it's something you just said is Nick Costco and I, who's a co-host on the show occasionally, he and I are writing a book, the 12 most important personal development lessons. Like if you went across all of the classic personal development books
Yeah,
and you took like the 12 most important lessons, there's a reason why it's 12 because this next part is then where those roots are, those lessons in the Bible.
hmm,
And what we found is like every one of those lessons, there's some root in the Bible,
yeah, yeah,
right? Like, heart coherence is what I was talking about earlier, but it says guard your heart because,
right,
I mean, it's
yeah,
like it's there. And
yeah.
it's
It's
so
there.
cool because, whether you believe that the Bible is the word of God like I do, or if you just think it's a great book that's lasted
Yeah,
the time, the thousands of years, then either way, reading that Bible
Yeah.
and thinking of how it pertains to you and personal development is huge. So I love
Yeah.
what you just said there
It's huge, and
because
I will say that, it's not fashionable anymore because we've gotten into the habit of hitting people over the head with the Bible as Christians, but really and truly, if you think of it as just God the Father just trying to give you the best possible advice he could give you so that you don't screw up your life. It's
yeah,
all there, every bit of it. And I think, people get tripped up because maybe they're trying to read King James or something that is just really hard to understand. But,
I
my
can't.
advice is, do it, go to NIV or a Life Application Bible, read a few minutes. My husband gets up at 3 every morning and reads. And you read it and you're just like, this is exactly what I needed to know today.
Isn't it amazing? We do this thing. We have a group of 20 guys. We go on U version and we do these Bible devotionals, right?
Mm,
Studies. And it's all different kinds of topics. And then we comment.
mhm.
Everybody comments. And so you see what's going on in other people's lives. They
Yeah,
need prayer. Sometimes they need help.
yeah,
And, but you like learn all that
yeah.
through different people that have created these courses. We've been doing it for not 10 years, but at least 5 or 8 or something like that. And it's amazing because the group has grown.
Oh, wow.
And I agree with you. It's like sometimes it's like, man, that's exactly what I needed. Or the verse of the day or whatever it is. And it's the that human nature of like if you just said, I'm going to read one page of the Bible every day,
Yeah,
you'll read more. But if you just commit to
yeah,
one,
yeah,
then that gets you started and it's something that you can take action on. So I'm always just amazed. And here's one thing I, for some reason, feel compelled to say is, we all have these thoughts in our head. And if you think like the Holy Spirit is telling you one thing,
mhm,
just remember this: the Holy Spirit never contradicts Scripture. So if you're thinking something and it contradicts Scripture, then it's not from the Holy Spirit; it's from the enemy. So that's
yeah.
that thought is not going to serve you.
We could do a whole show just on that. And I would say even with prayer, like I have a friend the other day that had prayed for something to open up for her, and then it opened and she went on this interview and did all this, and then it didn't feel right. But why, I thought God was pulling me in that direction. I said, well, maybe he did, because what you learned on that and that whole process is you don't want to work for a company. And I think he's telling you to stay in your business as an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
So, sometimes we pray and we want the answer we want, but if you just pay attention, his ways are never our ways, and you may get a totally different answer, and that is the answer. And sometimes silence is the answer. Sometimes
yeah.
you're just being
Sometimes be
told,
still, right?
just be
You know what's
still. Yeah.
What's so funny about that, Sharon, is I had a company in Colorado, and I had one person that we had to terminate, and we had one person who died of lung cancer, even though he never smoked in his life. And it was a like 70% of our revenue. These two gentlemen,
Oh,
right?
wow.
And so I thought, the traffic in Colorado is getting crazy, all this stuff. So I'm going to move from Colorado. And I said, and I prayed. I said, God, like give me an opportunity somewhere warmer. I'm from California. I don't really like this snow. I'm not a skier. Everything else. And this opportunity, this incredible opportunity, opened up in South Dakota. So I get back down on my knees and I said, God, I know you're really busy and you probably got confused, but like South Dakota is colder than here.
Yeah. Did you
Like
not know that?
maybe but I said, let's go to South Dakota, right? I actually visited on the warmest day they've ever had in January. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm sure God set that up because I was like, this isn't that bad. And which it really is bad in January. And then a year later, I had a house part-time in Naples and then eventually full-time in Naples. So to your point, it wasn't,
You
I always
never
say
know.
God's never thrown me a fastball belt high,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's just that's the way my life works.
Yeah.
It's always curveballs. I always think it's going to hit me, and then it doesn't,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think you and I could talk about stuff like that all day long.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to be able to even have these conversations, and probably some listeners would think we're a little bit nuts, but when you've had those experiences, and have that relationship, it's hard to describe, but it never leaves you.
It, you know what? The best way that I describe it when people like ask me or they have anxiety or whatever is I say, I don't have anxiety because of that piece.
Mhm.
Like the piece that I get because of
Yeah,
that relationship is more important than any money or any possession that I'll ever
yeah,
have.
yeah,
And as a kid that grew up without peace, it's it's the thing I value more than anything by
yeah,
a million times.
yeah, for sure. I can't imagine living in the world as it is today with the complexity that we're all experiencing and not having, a spiritual foundation.
Yeah,
And I see it a lot, and people are just so scared, and, I'm seeing such an increase in anxiety and depression, and trying to find a way, because I'm not one that wants to push my faith on my clients. I don't
yeah,
feel like that's my job, but trying to get them, because one of the lines of development, there are lines of development as well as the stages. That's how you grow up and into the stages, is through the work in the lines. Cognitive is one line, spiritual is one line, moral is one line. So how can I help people develop a spiritual line when they don't have one at all? That's always my dilemma. And sometimes it's just about getting them back into nature where they can appreciate that there's something beyond them that is created, what they're seeing before them, whether it's a mountain or the ocean or whatever. But that is the challenge today, I think, is to help people develop a spiritual line when they have no foundation or they've left a particular tradition for whatever reason.
I totally agree with you. And it's interesting because I think it depends on every person. Like, if somebody, I have a friend who, like, I don't, wa- I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I almost feel like she thinks she's too smart to believe in
Mhm.
God, that she can explain everything with science and math. But when you actually start to do that, you prove that there is a God. And
Exactly. Yeah.
um, and I don't think she's ever pursued that because she just says, well,
You just gave me
um,
an idea for a book. I probably should look at spiritual line of development through the stages.
I
Because
love
in
that.
the early stages, it's sort of like the tooth fairy, where it's concrete, God, I pray and God gives me a, whatever, like he's an ATM machine. But
Yeah,
as you mature and grow up into the later stages, you become the understanding of the divine and God in all things and in all places, and every cellular atom of our existence becomes a deeper reality. Like one of the questions I get often is, how did you ever get through the loss of your son? Well, I could never have done it without my faith. The
right.
Lord was with me through that process, literally, even in my son's dying moments, got me through it. But then also, my son is with me. I mean, I
Yeah,
feel my son with me all the time. It's just
yeah,
it's not even something I can describe. So where my husband has to go to the cemetery, and I know he has his own way of experiencing Michael still, but he's a man of action. He's an 8, so he's got to go do something. My son has the most pristine, his I always know my husband's been there because there's not a weed around my son's gravesite, where I
yeah,
don't feel that need to go there because he is with me. He's in my work. He's in my thoughts. I can't even put it into words. So while I miss him in one way, in a concrete way, I miss being able to hug him or kiss him. Um, his spirit is always there.
yeah.
So
No,
there's the grief is different. And so I see grief, and that's another book I want to write, is grief through the stages, because I believe that grief, and I believe all suffering is really an opportunity for developmental growth if we can make meaning from what's happened to us.
one of my favorite quotes is adversity introduces a person to themselves.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
as grief, trauma, I've done a lot of research on trauma throughout my life.
Hmm.
And the thing that I realized is, going back and like I had this therapist say, well, what would you say to that little boy? I said, I wouldn't
Hmm.
say anything to them. Like, it's like I would. like I don't want to look like I can go back, you can do all this stuff, but at some point in time you have to
Yeah.
realize your future is bigger than your past.
Yeah.
And that God put you through those things for a reason. And I believe my reason is so that I could help other people understand money and have and say, look, if I could do it, you can do it. I wasn't a great student. I wouldn't say that I have some kind of gift to I mean, I know how to take action,
Yeah.
and I know how to take, and I'm conservative in my approach. So I'm
Yeah.
not gonna, throw money. I don't gamble. I mean,
Yeah.
like, there's just it's if I again, it's making progress every day. It's Kaizen and whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. It's like it's every day making progress. Back to your husband waking up at 3 o'clock in the
Yeah.
morning and reading his Bible or
Yeah.
praying or whatever. It's little increments. There's days where you make good progress, and there's days where it doesn't seem like the progress is very much. But guess what? You just keep
Yeah.
you
You
keep
keep
cutting
going.
the wood.
And I think too, and I know I've kept you too long, but I want to just say when you were speaking to that right now, what came up for me is it's a perfect example of what I mean by integration. So that you know to take action, you're driven to take action, but sometimes action looks like being still.
Absolutely.
And I suspect you're good at that too. So
Yeah.
so because you wouldn't have the mindset that you have if you weren't good at that too. So that to me is integration of I'm listening to the spirit and the body. And there are days where today I didn't feel like working out. I had company all weekend. I didn't feel like it, but I just, I have a commitment here. I have a trainer. You're working out. Once I
Yeah.
get there, I'm good, you know. But again, another day like the weekend I described several weeks ago, the best choice was be still today. Just
Yeah.
be still because your body needs that today. And you earned it because you've done all this for the last 4 days. And this is your reward now to just be still and stay in your PJs all day, no makeup, no hair, no nothing.
And no guilt.
Yeah, and no guilt about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
had
really
ice cream last night. I have ice cream maybe like twice a year, right?
yeah, oh,
And I ate so much ice cream last night, you would not even believe it. And I just decided I'm finishing it tonight. Like I'm not
yeah,
going to have
yeah,
most of it, and then maybe a little bit tomorrow, because then it's now I'm developing a habit. So like I just said, I'm eating it all tonight, and
yeah.
I did. And it
And
was
it's a
like,
choice though. It's a choice based on the fact that tomorrow you can get up and it's done. It's not going to be like, oh, now I broke my chain of good eating, so now what the heck, I'm just going to do it for 6 more months.
yeah,
No.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the difference.
Yeah. And it's momentum, and it's so like you said, this morning the alarm went off, and I got up so that since Riley's first day today for her trainer is, I just got up and said, hey, what last night I said, hey, what time are we getting up in the morning? And just like it was cool. So when she's leaving the trainer, then I'm going to work out, and my trainer said, you seem a little tired today. And I was like, yeah, because you do not understand how much sugar I put in my
Yeah,
body last night. So that's why I'm tired today. But
yeah,
guess what? Tomorrow. Oh, and I know what I was going to say is back to your point of this, like giving yourself grace and everything else. It's also recovery. What you realize is like tomorrow, I do stretching and massage for an hour, and I do that every week. It's harder for my body to recover from that than the workout,
mm,
because she's doing deep tissue
right,
and
right.
we're stretching,
Yeah,
like stretching this 59-year-old body further than I sometimes think. Are you sure you know what you're doing here? Like that
yeah.
hurts,
Are you sure my body can really do this? Yeah,
Yeah,
I hear
but
you.
guess what? My back feels better. My
Right.
my 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 golf game is better. Everything else, and I'm one of those people, Sharon, that I know when I'm 75 years old, I'm going to be hitting the ball further than I am now,
That's
because
that's
I
awesome.
just do not believe in getting old and fading off into the sunset and
No,
like my muscle mass going away.
no,
I don't believe in that at all. I believe
no.
in my biological age. I can keep it going down as I get older.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. At least we
So
got to keep.
I think we can talk all day, and
I
maybe
know
I'll
we
just have
could.
you back on, because I do want to talk to you about the spirituality of success and wealth and abundance. And I think that is And I have that balance too that you just mentioned about, like, I don't want to hit somebody over the head with my faith, but I want you to know what I believe. And there's
Right.
a reason why I believe what I believe. And if you haven't ever been exposed to that,
Yeah.
then, like, find somebody to help you with that. Reach out to me
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah,
Be
I
happy
think
to help
if
anybody.
you walk the talk to the best of your ability, when I was speaking around the country, for instance, I would have people coming up to me all the time and saying, "What do you read? How do you know this?" Then there's an opportunity,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
share your faith. But anyway, we could talk about that for a very long time because I think we're at a critical point in the Christian world, um, where we have to make a decision to do a better job of loving people well enough such that they're curious at least about how we do that.
So I have an
Rather
idea on
than
how
try
we
to beat them over the head with you should be living life my way. That's
I have an idea on how we do that. Is Christians have to be known more for what we believe than for what we're for than what we're against. And
well
I
said.
think too many times, especially the mainstream, want to talk about all the things that Christians are against. How
Hmm.
about, like, even like those commercials that like are like talk about Jesus? Like, people are always shocked when it's like a Christian organization putting together those videos and those ads, because let's start talking about what we believe, like
Hmm.
what we're for, right?
Right.
And we're for it. Jesus didn't judge, didn't I mean
Yeah.
condemn. He, like, and so that's where I would encourage anybody is, like, get to know Jesus, like read about Jesus, read John. Okay, that's a great, like, depiction of Jesus's life. Now, if you can find fault in, like, say, well, he was this or that, or his anger,
Hmm.
or he, then you're not, then go back and read it again,
Yeah.
because anyway, and again,
Yeah.
all right, we got to wrap this up.
Thank you so much, Jim. I've
So
enjoyed our time together.
yeah, exactly, I really enjoyed meeting you, and I look forward to reading your book. And I'm going to go to your website, I'm going to take the quiz, I'm going to do all of it. And so I would encourage everybody else in the audience to do that. And Sharon, we're going to wrap this up like we do every week with the incredible words of Earl Nightingale and The Strangest Secret. Take it away, Earl.
Here's the key to success and the key to failure. We become what we think about. Now let me say that again. We become what we think about.
Thanks for listening to the Breakaway Wealth Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to this show wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. If you want to start increasing your wealth building ability right now, go to community.createtailwind.com to join our free online community and get access to free, in-depth training designed to help you build real, lasting wealth. See you next week.